Welcome to Rebecca and Rebecca,
where we love books.
Welcome everyone to this episode of Rebecca and Rebecca. I'm Rebecca Reed from Indiana, and this is my partner in books, Rebecca Yager from outside Dallas, Texas. How you doing today, Rebecca?
Doing good. It is a blustery day here in Texas. I went grocery shopping and about got blown away. So,
Well, the wind is going all the way from Texas to Indiana because it is also windy here. So,
we're just blowing
uh,
you away.
yeah, exactly. Well, we're excited today because this is one of our favorite days. We are interviewing an author, which we love to do. And this author is from my own state of Indiana. This is Beth Steury. Welcome, Beth.
Hello from blustery Indiana and snowy.
Yes. Yeah,
Oh,
we
it's
had snow today
snowing.
too. Well, it
Mhm.
Oh,
was. I don't know if it is now, but it
okay.
definitely was. Matter
Well,
of fact, the kids were looking out the window today when I was in school and they're going, "Can we go home?" I'm like, "It's no, no, you cannot."
okay. Well, do y'all want my 60 degrees in blustery?
Yes, please.
Please.
Sure.
That's good. Well, it is our favorite day, Author Day, and we interview authors. So, Beth, before we dive into our conversation, I'm going to read your bio so we can introduce our audience to you a little bit, and then we'll find out more about you as we go along. So, and I love this from your website. It says, because her home office is too quiet and lacks a continual supply of Diet Coke, Beth Steury can often be found tucked in a booth at McDonald's with her laptop. Sometimes she's writing web content for businesses or penning young adult fiction or whipping her adoption search and reunion journey into memoir form. And I think we need to talk about that today, too. Often she's immersed in unraveling mysteries using genetic genealogy. This is cool. So, as a genetic genealogy enthusiast and search angel, she assists adoptees and others with genetic mysteries in finding answers to decades old questions. Beth writes and speaks about her experience as a foundling and the journey to connect with her biological family. She also serves on the executive board of the National Association of Adoptees and Parents. And then, yeah, as you said, you write young adult fiction in the middle of.
Yeah. And amongst all of that other stuff, right?
Yep,
Well,
yep.
welcome, Beth. We're so glad you're here.
I am thrilled to be here with you guys today.
So why don't you, I know I'm privileged because I know her personally, so I already know a lot of these things, but do you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about your adoption story? Because I think it's fascinating and what it kind of led to you to do now as an adult.
Sure. I was adopted as an infant. I am the oldest of four children, all adopted as infants. So we weren't related to each other. You know, we weren't a sibling group. We had great parents and very normal growing up and turned into responsible, productive adults, all of us. But it wasn't until, and it's coming up on the 10-year anniversary this July, it wasn't until I learned that I'd actually been left on a doorstep that my curiosity exploded to the point of not being contained any longer. And I had to do something about finding out who my biological parents were. So, fast forward, I took a DNA test because even though Indiana was opening its records, I wasn't going to have an original birth certificate if I'd been found on a doorstep and not born in a hospital. And so, DNA in pretty quick fashion, actually, especially back then in 2016, led to both my birth mother's family first and a few months later to my birth father's family. And I was a massive secret that my birth mother had kept until her dying day. She was no longer living. Birth father had no idea. So I have connected with people on both sides, and for all for the vast part of it, it has been a very good experience. You know, family dynamics are complicated no matter what, whether there's an adoption related or not. But it has been a good experience, and there is nothing like meeting people that you look like, that you share traits with
Mm.
and characteristics with. There is nothing like that. you grow up assuming that when you're not adopted. You just look like aunt whoever, or your sister or your mom or whatever, and you have so and so's qualities and so's bad habits and whatever. And when you decades later see these people and realize how alike you are, it is something that you can hardly describe. So my daughter and I just became so enthralled and enamored with this genetic genealogy, the way you can take a DNA test and you look at your results and you can figure out where you came from. So we solved a family mystery on my husband's side. Right about the same time we were finding my birth father. And then there was a mystery within that one, and we solved that. And then we just hit the ground running. And so it's going on 10 years that we have been solving mysteries within our family, but many, many, many others for mostly strangers. A few people I've known, which is extra cool, but mostly strangers that I come across. I help them figure out some kind of genetic mystery.
So I think that's really neat.
It is incredibly rewarding because someone helped me, and it's kind of like a passing it forward, but
Hmm.
it's even more than that. It's just helping someone, find these answers that decades ago would never have been, you wouldn't have been able to find them.
Hmm.
So it's just very rewarding. And this afternoon I was working on a case right until I ran home from my office to meet with the two of you. I was working on someone doesn't know their father and he really wants to know who his dad is. So
That's
It
cool.
is just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm adopted, which Beth knows, and
mhm.
I've never really felt the need to like search it out, but I know who to call when I decide I
That's
want to.
right.
So,
That's hard to do.
There you
yes.
go.
It's a
Wow.
very personal decision, a
Yeah.
very personal decision. And there's no right or wrong. If you want to know, you should have every right to know who and what the circumstances were. And if you have no interest, then no one should push someone to do it.
Yeah,
That's
I
true.
agree. I think that's fair.
Mhm.
Um, we should probably talk a little bit about writing since
Well,
we're,
Sure.
I
in
do have
that
a
kind of.
relating question
Mm,
for her. In
okay.
all your discovery of your now your biological family, or even in your adoptive family, is there other writers? Have you found any the creative souls
Well,
there?
that is a very good question. I would say in my adopted family, no. But the very first person I connected with in my biological family was a half brother who has never published anything, but definitely dabbles in writing and has for a long time. And so, there was a little bit of a connection there. And he said how our mutual uncle had been interested in writing. And I actually found in an old history book um, from Angola, Indiana, that something that my uncle and my grandfather had written about. It was just like covering, I don't know, 100 years of history in Angola, something like that. And they each had written an article about something in there. And that was very interesting to me to read that. And then my birth father said, well, he actually wrote a poem. And he said he really doesn't, the creative side of the brain, whichever that is, he says is void in him. He is a very analytical, scientific type person. But the discovery of a daughter he didn't know he had encouraged him to write this poem. So whatever, whatever that is.
Okay. Wow. But you mentioned you're thinking about putting it into a memoir. You're some of
Yes, I blogged extensively from practically the moment I found out about the doorstep detail. And I was part of a writing group where we were doing a blog where we just each wrote stuff. We had a schedule. And so I started telling my story there. Well, it was a very cathartic thing to do, putting all of this out there, exploring your own feelings and all of that. Well, people were intrigued and started following along. And at that point, we were all working on just writing whatever we could write, because that's always been something I encourage people, just write whatever, just practice writing, become better at using words and putting them together. And so, it fit that, but it became very important to me, but like I said, there was a following. And when I started finding family, I could just say, here's the whole journey, and they would read it. and
Mm.
be, fascinated with it. And I do want to put the whole thing together into a memoir form. Also, meshing with it all that I've learned about adoption, the adoption community, um, that type of thing. So this 10-year anniversary is looming. It wasn't too long ago that I realized, oh my word, 10 years on July, I think it's the 21st or 22nd, is when I made the doorstep discovery detail. And so I'm like, I had to have it done by then, but that would require me to do nothing but that from now till then. And so that probably won't happen. But yes, I definitely want to.
Oh, I think it'd be fascinating. And it's nice because you really already have a lot of it. You just have to
I do. It would be
refine it.
stitching it together
Hmm.
and weaving in other things, So
Right.
yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm
You got
almost
one?
speechless here with this whole
Oh.
story. Being left on a doorstep, that just seems like something that's always been in the movies. And
Mhm.
here you are, and your
Yeah.
father never knew your
Never knew of a
child.
pregnancy or anything. Super complicated scenario. I have to look at my mother in that scenario and think I understand why she did what she did. But I feel I grieve a lot for her because the decisions she felt she had to make, never having support, that afterwards, because if no one knows, who are you going to talk about with? There's speculation that her best friend 2 doors down might have known, according to my
Hmm.
brother. He said if anyone knew, Louise knew, but we don't know
Hmm.
if Louise knew. Louise died only 1 year before I started
Oh,
looking, where my birth mother had been gone for 25, 26 years or
Oh
something
goodness.
already. But
okay.
Louise might have known, so
Just
Yeah.
amazing. Well, I think part of this is coming into your stories. If we can shift to the book and the young adult um, aspect of it for Before I Knew You, which is our book that we're discussing,
yes.
and Choices Matter, which I love the series title.
Choices Matter series, right? My
Mm.
online writing group at the time helped me with titles, and I'm really happy with all of them. But I always said, man, titles are hard. But we were a critique group, so they knew the story well because we passed chapters back and stuff
Hmm.
all the time, and so their input was very valuable because they weren't just reading a blurb and helping me with the title. They knew the story, and so that was really good. Critique partners, I think, are great.
Hmm.
I agree. Yes.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so absolutely, this idea of um, like the choices that a pregnant mother has
Mhm.
are definitely part of your story, but there's more to it than that.
Well, I started writing this long before I was on this journey. So I admit freely that I dawdled around. It was hard to hit publish that first time, but then it wasn't as hard the second time. And then I got to a point in the third book and I didn't know how to finish it. And then I just did a ton of other things and didn't finish it. So yeah, all of this came before. And so it comes much more from all the years I spent working with teenagers than it comes from anything in my life. People have said to me, "Oh, this is your story, isn't it?" I'm like, "No, there's really not." Um, Maggie likes a lot of the things I do, chocolate, Diet Coke, different things like that. And it has some of my characteristics, but there's no part of my story. But 20 years of teaching senior high school, Sunday school class, camp counselor, quiz coach,
Mm.
mentor, small group leader, all this kind of stuff. And then once I was out of that, pretty much, I was subbing in the public school, and high school was my favorite area to be in. Please don't ask me to do kindergarten or first grade, which I would if I had to, but oh my word. Give me a high school group anytime. And a lot of subs were the opposite. Oh, no, 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 I don't want those high schoolers. And so and what was really fun was, your day can be kind of slow and boring if you're subbing, depending on what the teacher has for you. Now, I had teachers who just said, here's the lesson I was teaching today. You stand up and teach it. I did have that, which I don't understand. But a lot of times it was like, give them this paper, they'll do it. So you're just sitting there. So, of course, I'm dragging my laptop with me every day.
Mhm.
And it wasn't long before the kids were like, "So, Mrs. Steury, what are you doing?" "Oh, I'm writing a book." "What? You're writing a book?" Well, um, and then I put my books in the library, and they thought it was very cool to have the sub for the day was the teacher who wrote the book in the library, that kind of thing. And there were a time or two where I said, "Okay, guys, I need your help. What would you do in this situation?" And I would get a little bit of input from them.
Mhm.
But one of my favorite things was one of the girls said, "Mrs. Steury, I read your book." And I said, "Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. Did you like it?" "Yeah, I did, but I don't even read books." And honestly, she probably was a very seldom book reader. I knew her well enough to know that. But
Mhm.
I think the connection of knowing the person. And so
Yeah.
when book one came out and when book two came out, I did a giveaway at the school and they put their name in for drawing and all of that kind of stuff. So it was nice to have that connection and I had a super supportive high school librarian who would make a big deal about the books and everything. But like I said, decades of being in youth ministry as well as personal relationships with kids is where the inspiration for the stories came.
Well, I think that shows, your background shows because Preston and Maggie and their group of friends. I mean, it was to me so realistic. I immediately just jumped back into high school, and how I
Mm,
felt
good. I'm
dating
glad to
and
hear
things.
that.
Yeah, jumped. I mean, it was to me very true to life, and you being famous in your in subbing and maybe more students will start to read.
Well,
They know the
that's
author.
always a good thing. Especially when you have a reluctant reader, you say to
Mhm.
them, "Well, what are your interests?" Don't have them
Mhm.
read about something they couldn't care less about because that's not going to help them
Right.
like reading. So having realistic things, maybe knowing an author, whatever, I think is a good thing.
Mhm.
I would totally agree with that. And because there are a lot of kids who, as a matter of fact, I've heard them say, "Well, I would read more, but they're making us read this genre
Mhm.
or this Lexile level, and there just aren't any books in the library that are that I like to read, this
Right,
kind of thing."
right.
And which is one of the reasons, and we've talked about this on Rebecca and Rebecca before, that I think, too many authors, dumb down some of those bigger words
Mhm.
because they don't want people to stumble over them. And it's like, no, you need to let some kids stumble over them because they need those higher Lexile levels because that's what the teachers want them to read. And if there aren't any books that are good books for them, then it just makes them hate reading. And we don't
Yeah.
want that.
No,
That's not the
absolutely not.
point.
I was a reader, and my
Mhm.
daughter is an extreme reader. My son, not as much, but he reads. He asked for a couple books for Christmas. So that, an adult 30 something son asking for books for Christmas is
Mhm.
great. And we've really encouraged our grandson to be a reader. And yeah. Well, I think the power of story, I think the three of us all understand that the power of story is so important. People learn when they're reading fiction. They do. They learn about how to engage in life and
Mhm.
get help with decisions and all sorts of things. It doesn't have to just be facts,
Right.
that they're reading that they can learn from.
No, I completely agree with that too.
Mhm.
I think that, it's so important to learn, like, I think we learn by with the characters
Mhm,
because it's
mhm.
not threatening, because it's not us. And we
Mhm.
can see, like, oh, that person reacted in this way. I probably wouldn't have done that, but maybe
Mhm,
next time that happens to me, I can
mhm,
try that. Or,
mhm.
oh, I never thought to react that way. Maybe I can try that. And I think that's, it's that idea. A lot of kids they just don't have good role models on how to deal with situations at home or in their general group of friends or whatever. And so by reading fiction that is realistic
Mhm.
and deals with these kinds of
Mhm.
problems, they can learn these methods of dealing with things in a different way, non-violent or with a thoughtful process involved, or whatever the
Mhm,
case,
mhm,
something different that is more positive and more productive than what they're going to learn in their own
mhm.
life. Because not that people aren't trying to give them that advice, but it's more threatening when somebody says, "Hey,
Yeah,
you should do this," than it is to read how some
right.
character that you kind of like does it in a book. That's just
Mhm.
less And you're more they're more tend they have a tendency to listen to that more, consider that more, I think.
I think they could read something that was the very same words that mom said last week, and they would
Mhm.
write off what mom said
Mhm.
and give thoughtful consideration to what they read. Just that's just a growing up thing, you know. It's not a parent pointing their finger at you saying, do this, you know. So,
Yes, it kind of bypasses that automatic defense system that
mhm,
people have against their parents' ideas and things like that.
right.
Yeah, like that automatic defense system, and it's true. Some of my teenagers
Yeah.
are like that and stuff. All right, well, let's dive into the book a little bit because we do have Maggie and Preston, and they're young love at its finest, but yet they're still grappling with young love, and then they're grappling with the pressures of the world to not have premarital sex and to not go into things too heavily, which I mean, you dive right into this. These are real issues, real things that the teenagers are facing, and I really like that. And it still, again, resonated with my 17-year-old self because I was dating my husband back then,
Mhm.
and so very true to life. So, all right, so inspiration had to come from all your years, or was there a specific
Um,
catalyst for the story?
there was one specific catalyst.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to a radio program on Christian radio, you know, probably dusting or doing the dishes or something at the same time, years, and we're talking a long, long time ago. And there was the speaker, and I don't remember who it was saying how he was a youth speaker and he did big, you know, conferences and all this kind of stuff. And he said, I'll never forget one time after I had, you know, I spoke to this huge audience of kids. Afterwards, a young guy pulled me aside and said, but what happens when you didn't wait? What happens when you didn't make the right decisions?
Mm-hmm.
What now? Because obviously he was, you know, telling them, don't do this and don't do this and live this way and all this kind of stuff. But what happens when you didn't? And I just felt like rooted to the floor when I heard that and
Mm-hmm.
thought, yeah. And he said, I changed the way I spoke after that.
Mm-hmm.
That kid had an impact on how I spoke. I talked to them differently and I gave them different insights and advice and all of that from then. And so that was the catalyst of my idea, I think, for the story because I didn't really know a Preston, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like the story started with me with him, but of course she came along really quick. And
Mm-hmm.
initially, if I have to admit it, I had a lot easier time with his point of view than hers. I don't know if it's growing up with three brothers or what, but
I have three brothers too.
I felt like, you know, and someone told me, you do teenage guy really well. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, oh, well, good. But I did work really, really hard at that. I worked really hard at making them different because they're different people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Every personality needs to be different in your book. I heard an author say once, I had like, you know, this cast of 20 people, and I read back through and thought, they all have the exact same personality. They all talk the very same. They all do everything the very same. Okay, so she had her framework, but she knew she had to go in and make them different.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, you know, guy and girl, hopefully they're going to be different, but they needed to have their own everything. So I can say that's why it took so many years, right? I can blame it on that.
I think
Yeah,
Rebecca and I
well,
talked off a
yeah.
while back as we were both in the middle of reading the book, and we both talked about how Preston was jumping off the page or
Mhm.
off the audiobook. Were you reading it, Rebecca, or was it? Yeah,
I read it.
you read it.
I don't
Um,
Yeah.
have an audio, so
don't have
Yeah.
it.
sorry.
Okay, I'm so used to her being audio.
Yeah,
Um,
right, right.
Yes.
but it jumped, and his POV, it really was well done because I mean,
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like it's very realistic. I mean, I think all of that, all the whole situation, I think the whole school situation and, what the kids are, what they're talking about, what they care about, it resonated so much with me and what I see in the school system with the kids right now, even now, because you wrote that a few years ago, but it hasn't changed that much. And the kids still they're worried about who they're going to go out with on the weekend. They're worried about who they're going to homecoming with. They're worried about prom. They're worried
prom.
about
Mhm.
so and so just broke up with so and now
Yes.
so and so wants to go out with this. I mean, that's all, you hear that stuff all the time. And so It's very realistic, and there's
Hmm.
that group, there's always the groups, that clicks that they all, these people
Hmm.
are together, these people are together, and
Hmm.
oh, nope, now there's been a big shakeup, and these people are, over here with these people, and I mean, so I think, yeah, all of that was very, very much, exactly what I see still today, and it's not just the relationship between Maggie and Preston that is realistic, but it's also, the relationship between the friends. You've got, um, is
Connor,
it Brittany? Is
Brittany, and
Brittany
Zach.
and Zach,
Yes.
right?
Right.
So, I mean, the having that best friend and what, the pull to do
Hmm.
what the peers want.
Hmm. Yeah. I peer pressure is huge for
Hmm.
teenagers, and who you hang out with matters. And so
Hmm.
Preston had friends who were better examples than others, and then he finds the people he really needs to hang out with. And I really like the character of Coach.
Hmm.
Yes. Yes.
Um, he's this mentor guy, which I think mentoring and accountability are huge issues. And I hoped that they came across as appealing, not as "Ugh, I never want to do that, But Coach is really careful not to ever tell them you
Hmm.
have okay, do this and then do this and do this. He leads them up to the point, and at one point Preston says, just tell me what to do. Okay, I'm not going to do that. But
Yeah.
I'm throwing out their advice and I'm here for you and all of that. So I did the mentoring thing for people. Mostly you just fell into it, fell into those relationships where you end up being their mentor. And when I did it, sometimes there was horrible parental involvement, but that really wasn't the case in Preston and Maggie's lives.
Mm-mm.
But not every parent in the book was great either,
Yeah.
and that's realistic too.
Hmm.
That's realistic too. Some people have awesome parents that are very involved and engaged. Some people have parents that aren't necessarily bad, but they don't engage. They're not
Right.
engaged with their kids' lives. They really don't have a clue what's going on. Oh, they feed them and house them and clothe them, and yeah, we love you, but they really aren't engaged in their
Right.
life. So I don't know. I just tried to. Uh, it sounds like there was no formula. It was pretty organic how it all came together, but it came from a lot of, different sources and different experiences that I had witnessed.
Hmm.
Well, I think I liked Tucker and Claire also
Hmm.
because you had, they weren't Coach, the adult, they were young
Hmm.
adults still,
Yes. Hmm.
that had gone through something similar, but just enough older to have that experience,
Yeah.
but really relatable back to Preston
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
Preston and Maggie as they double dated with them as
Yeah.
well and
Right.
Hmm.
things.
Right.
So,
I did try to keep things real.
mhm.
If you ask kids who I taught in Sunday school, there was nothing we wouldn't talk about, and they knew that. Nothing. We broached subjects that I'm sure a lot of teachers, oh, let's skip that part of the book, or whatever. We talked about anything because that's what you need.
Mhm.
Um, you need to have adults willing to have those conversations, and so. I got pretty real in the book. And I know I've had a few adults along the way who are like, yeah, a little too real for me. And I'm like, that's okay. I really tried not to go over any edges and prayed about keeping it, but I wanted it to be realistic.
Well, I think you definitely accomplished that. And I think the kids that read it are going to appreciate that
Mhm.
because too many people do like shy away and they really just want to know
Hmm.
what people think and like, what did you do in your life? They want to know that a lot. They want to know like, what did you do? What if you were
Mhm.
faced with this situation, what would you do? And those kinds of things. And while, like coach, you can't say, well, I would do this, this, and this because you aren't in their situation and you're not even in that hypothetical situation. So really, it's hard to know without being there, what would he actually do? But you can say, like, well, here's some choices. Here's some
Hmm.
things you could think about. Like, here's
Hmm.
some options to consider, and all of that. So,
I
yeah, I
used to
mean,
tell I used to tell my Sunday school kids, I'd say, what do you think my biggest job is here? Teaching you, coming here every week, bringing snacks upon snacks upon snacks and all this other stuff. What is my biggest job? Oh, and they kind of look at you and not know. And I said, my biggest job is to make you think. teach you and help you to know how to think. You're going to have to make your own decisions. Mom and dad aren't always going to be there saying, no, you can't, and giving you the easy out. You've got to learn to think on your own. And so that's what I hope
That's
they were learning to do, you know.
That's really good. I mean, I feel like that as a school as a teacher today, like,
Mhm.
and I told somebody that today actually. I said, my content, like what I teach, the content that I teach is really less important than
Mhm.
the relationships I develop with my
Mhm.
students and
Mhm.
what we accomplish as together,
Right.
because you can memorize whatever you want and forget it the next day.
Mhm.
You can look it up on Google. You can look it up on, Chat GPT, whatever.
Mhm.
That's fine. But
Mhm.
in the end, it's knowing how to choose between the options that you're given
Yeah,
that are going to make the difference.
that's right. That is very, very true. And a big theme is yeah, saving sex for marriage, but it's never too late to make better choices.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. You messed up. Okay. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean you mess up forever. And I have heard kids say that. Well, what's the point now? I've watched
Mhm.
that decision process in people who did mess up, and then they just let that dictate the rest of their life.
Mhm.
That was the biggest maybe theme I wanted to ring true was you don't have to keep making choices that were wrong. You know, one bad, two, three, or 10, you still can chart a different course and do better.
Yeah, and you did. I liked that. I appreciated that, here's this kid trying to do right after
Mhm.
making a mistake, and
Mhm.
he's still facing some boundaries and
Mhm.
or obstacles and, even judgment from others, but he's still, trying to
And it
forge his
doesn't come
path.
easy to him.
No.
He gets very frustrated along the
Yeah.
way, and he doesn't change overnight. One of my friends said, "Oh, I thought he got kind of whiny." Well, he wasn't just saying, "Okay, I'm going to do better starting now and then do better." That doesn't happen hardly
That's
ever,
That's
maybe
not real
never.
life.
Yeah.
No, I think the idea, because I see it all the time, once you have a certain reputation,
Mhm.
changing that
Yeah,
reputation
it's true.
is like monumentally
Mhm.
difficult, no matter
Yes.
whether it's a
Uh-huh.
Playboy reputation or whether it's just a,
Yes.
a class clown reputation or
Hmm.
any sort of reputation,
Yeah,
whatever it may be. The kids hold you to that. Like
they
they
really do.
hold you
Hmm.
accountable for that
Mhm.
reputation.
Yep.
Even when you're trying to change, it's very, very difficult.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think he experiences that. Preston is who,
yes.
they all know who he is, you know.
Yeah.
And he's the kind of kid that they looked up to, but a lot of times for the wrong reasons, you know.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
I know someone who said, "Oh, I know the nieces and nephews look up to me all the time, and they think I'm so cool, but mostly it's all for the wrong reasons, because I do some things that maybe, that they think are fun and funny, but I'm not always the best example. Yeah, that happens.
Yeah.
That's good. All right, so we have book one, and this is Preston and Maggie coming together and kind of starting their relationship, and Preston has to face to face with his past and a
Yes.
decision with Alyssa. We don't give spoilers, so I don't know how far we can talk about all that
Okay.
and stuff. But where do you take it from? Because they're still in high school. They're what, juniors in high
They
school?
are, yeah, they meet the beginning of their junior year. And
Okay,
so junior year is still going on at the end of book one.
right.
And book two is the very next morning.
Okay.
Um, it picks up the very next morning and goes on. And, they're at a crossroads. Things they definitely aren't where he wants them to be. And she's
Hmm.
just in this huge time. I need time. I need time. I need time
Hmm.
kind of thing. But of course, um, things keep coming more and more and more.
Hmm.
And I will say, book three picks up the very next day where after book two ends as well. So
Okay.
That's good. So all three are out now, so
all three are out.
they can
Yes. And
binge read.
it's best to, yes, that's right. And of course, it was my plan to do it much quicker, but we all, it happens. And so we just go from here.
Yeah, but timing's everything. Again, they're all out now, and series
Right.
are big right now, and so I think it's right on time, right where you
Thank you.
need
We're
to
going to go with
be.
that.
So that's good. All right. Well, now that this series is finished, and we've mentioned you're working on your memoir, is there anything else you're writing or anything else coming up
Well,
for you?
not really, not book wise. I was blogging about saving sex for marriage while I was writing this, and people would come to me and say online that was just a really interesting experience. And I kind of quit. I mean, it's all still there. I don't really add to it anymore. But people would say you need to package these into little books, and so I did. And I have one and two, and then the third one, I almost think I should have done first, but I have say uh, uh, the who, what, when, where, how, and why of saving sex. And it was mostly these blog posts put together,
Mhm.
in this little booklet form. And then saving sex for marriage in a 50 Shades world.
Mm.
Okay, because the
Mm.
world is not, 50 Shades was coming out big when I was first putting this together.
Mhm.
Okay, so the world's telling you everything but. And so how do you um, realistically do this? Realistic because that's what it is. Practical and very practical, realistic and candid. And then the third one is I was almost going to say it was supposed to be, but it still is going to be, but I didn't wait.
Mm.
And sometimes I think I should have pulled those together first because, that is the reality of so many people is
Hmm.
Right.
but I didn't wait. And so I really need to put an end to that little series before I do too much on the memoir. But you write what's in your head, and whenever it's there, you do it. So I do want to pull that third one together. I do want to do the memoir, and after that, I can't really say I have any big plans. Although finishing Preston and Maggie's story in my heart and mind, it's not completely done. It's a satisfying ending. That's all I'll say. No
Mhm.
one's going to want to strangle me if they end. Okay. But But could their story go on? Yes. And new adult fiction
Yeah.
is sorely lacking in um books and series that come from a Christian worldview. There just isn't hardly. And in fact, secular definition of new adult tends to be that it just gets heavier into sex and
Mhm.
other things that they honestly face, but not heavier in the way of, helping us grapple with this and make wise choices. But it just is like they have the license to be more explicit.
Hmm.
And so the thing that I would struggle with is finding an audience. YA is a hard audience to find anyhow. That um, ebooks are fabulous in for adults, but young adults don't read ebooks that much. They're more paper books.
Mhm.
They also a lot of young adult books are, well, about 50% is what I've read, 55% of the readers of young adult books are adults, which is cool. I don't care if adults read it, but adults tend to be the ones buying the books then for the young adults. So it's
Right.
just the whole approach to marketing for young adults is really tough. And I think
Mhm.
for new adults would be even harder. But do I think there's more story there? Yeah, I think
Mhm.
there could be. But am I willing to take it on? I don't know. I think it would be a lot of work, but we all know writing is a lot of work.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, we were fascinated, and like I said, definitely very realistic,
Yeah.
but not in an in your face or judgmental type of way. You did a great
Mhm.
job of being very you present the problem, and it's kind of like coach, right? You lead them, and then they have to make a choice.
Mhm.
And so we were very happy to read it. It was great, and I loved it. Can you tell us how to people should find you? Where can we find you and all of that?
My books are available on Amazon, paperback or ebook, all linked together. All five, if you count the two small books, they're available there too. Um, I don't have an audiobook, but I think that would be something I should pursue maybe because I know those are big. Personally, I'm not an audiobook person
Mhm.
because my mind doesn't shut off enough and I'm doing 10 other things and then it's like chapter 10? How did I get to chapter 10? if I were driving, I think maybe then, but I know that audiobooks really, really help a lot of people consume more reading because of, time constraints and schedules and all of that. But my local bookstore, I have them. My sister-in-law used to have a new and used furniture store here in my town, and she sold more books for me than anybody, but she
Oh,
doesn't have it anymore. So, yeah, Amazon and my local bookstore is where you're going to find me.
and what's your website?
It's just bethsteury.com. And I
Okay.
talk about everything that I do there. The genealogy stuff, I have a column in a local magazine called DNA Sleuth, and then I ended up putting those articles on there as well. And all of the choices matter, waiting matters, all of that kind of stuff is there along with the adoption journey. So,
Okay.
I decided I wanted to be a writer, and so I just try to look for any opportunities for writing.
All
And it
right.
is Beth Steury, and we're going to spell the last name for the audio part of
Mhm.
this, S
Yes,
T E U R Y
that's right.
.com. So,
Mhm.
All right. Well, we are, like I said, we thank you for coming on. We appreciate it. And so we will be next month. I don't know what we have
next
next
month
month.
is
What's next
Mandy
month? Oh,
Burma
that's
with
right.
the Royal Runaways Holiday, which was a delightful book on that. And that's March. And then for our March book bites, we're going to kick off the first book bite in March with Colleen Coble and Rick
Mhm.
Acker as they continue
Mhm.
writing together with
Mhm.
their series. So we'll catch up with them. We had Colleen on previously on long form Rebecca and Rebecca. So March is going to be fun. So please tune
Mm-hmm.
back in. Follow us on RebeccaandRebecca.com. We're on Instagram at Rebecca and Rebecca Reviews, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you listen, Spotify, listen, review.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you'll find us.
And our website is RebeccaandRebecca.com. I think you said that, but I'm just
It's
repeating
okay to
that
repeat.
because you can find all the links and everything there, and you can also see what's coming up next on both the book bites and the regular Rebecca and Rebecca reviews. So we hope to see you there, and hey, see you next time.
Yep, that's it. Thanks again, Beth.
Thank you, ladies.
Okay, take care, everyone.
Bye.